With it is also Occupation Day. Yeah, a bunch of stuff going on all over the country. Very dynamic. Yeah. Police Day in Chicago. Hey, let's not forget Chantilly Disgrace. What about the G8 up there at Camp Mogan-David? And let's not forget our favorite, the Russians out in Colorado, along with the Belgians, the Dutch, and the Mexicans. Oh, you thought it was just going to be the Russians? No, they're all goose-stepping together, guys. Here they come. Marching off into the distance as far as I can see. Dude, wow, cool, man. Anyway, it is a beautiful Communications Tuesday. Well, it's not so beautiful as I pointed out. You know, here's the thing we're going to kind of make you think about today. Tactical command and control, yeah, when you practice as a unit, of course, requires a whole lot of integrated components. Strategic command and control, or practice and occupation, is the same situation on a much larger scale. But let's just look at something that's happened here in the last few days. You know, it used to be, you might recall that the wheezing and whining about needing a bigger police state back in the 90s, guys. For those of you who might not have been around, the limitation that the reason that they had to murder off the Branch Davidians is that if something else happened where they wanted to go kill a whole bunch of other Americans, that they didn't have a big enough police state mechanism so that they could slaughter off Americans in a place like, say, Waco, near Waco, Texas, with the, you know, the Branch Davidian Church, that they just couldn't murder enough people in another place, you know, because they'd have to rotate manpower and, you know, maintain their little sieges, you know, and of course the dope peddlers, and you got the boozing, and you got the credit card scandaling, and, you know, credit card fraud by the Fed agents while they're there, and it takes a lot of work to keep the mercenaries in place, the prostitutes and the, you know, the government whores in general. Because of this, there was, you know, again, if you do a little research, you'll find much limitations, gnashing of teeth, renting of hair. Now, let's take a look at what the Soviet nutcases are doing just in the last 6-7 days. How big has the mechanism, the police state mechanism pushed by the communists of the 90s, now working into the teens? Because this is the year 2012. This is not the odds anymore, guys. Time doesn't slow down for anybody there. In the police state of 2012, America with a K, the subdivided 10 regions, what you have is, let's see, we have in the heartland of the United States, in Chicago, Illinois, you have a massive series of police state regional armies that have all come together under a internationalist corps operated by foreign nationals, to include the Israelis in Chicago that are now manipulating the regional capital of, you know, the capital of Region 5. Chicago is the capital for Region 5. Everybody remember that? The regional government that supposedly didn't exist. I always enjoyed that one because it's comical. You can go to, you know, if you go back to the day, you'll have ABC, NBC, CBS, and Communist News Network, and UPN before Fox. And their job was to lie. New York Times' job was to lie. There is no such thing as regional government. And yet, you could go, you could punch in the phone number there, and you know what would happen? You could call the regional capital of your area. You could go to the phone book and find the regional government mechanisms. Even before we had computer, you could go to government directories and you could show people the regional maps for all of the alphabet soup agencies, the regional government that didn't exist yet was right there in your face. You see, the whole idea here is that, you know, again, the audacious lie. So, back in the day, the regional government, which we know has been demonstrated, goes back actually to the Buck Act, it goes back to the communist Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was, of course, busy divvying up the country and handing us over as a war prize to the international bankers through the War Powers Act. Well, back in the day, that regional government mechanism that was put in place created these duchies, these sub-regions, these illegitimate mechanisms under the Constitution. States uncategorically, you cannot subdivide a state to create a series of states, nor take a handful of states to create a superstate. Oh, yeah, because everybody understood that's how the Europeans did stuff to manipulate, to manipulate power. So here we have this regional mechanism, which, of course, give it a different name, and everybody supposedly is supposed to be baffled by their BS. Well, a lot of people did catch on what's going on. Now, if you look, we have our Region 5 capital here in modern times, 2012, occupied by a combination of the Jewish mafia running and manipulating the city itself, or the regional capital. We have Rahm Emanuel, basically the equivalent to one of the Harkonnens coming from Gidi Prime / Washington, D.C., sent out to one of the planets, / in this case Chicago, as, shall we say, an overseer, and immediately given the position of mayor, which you might as well have just said, why have an election, just rubber stamp this rubber-lipped, big schnozzed, non-American, to be mayor of Chicago, to overlord the goyim for the, kosher mafia in the northwest corner of the city there, and of course going up to Wisconsin where most of the enclaves are. Anyway, now we have this massive police state mechanism. It's getting lots of media coverage, lots of noise, lots of pickle, smoke, and mirrors. The forces moved into play for this include areas of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, and southeastern Minnesota, along with elements of Minnesota, all to focus on the opportunity to use massive lethal force, albeit in a police thuggery kind of process in Chicago. Okay? On top of that, we have Chantilly disgrace. Oh, baby. Yeah, that's what I like. Chantilly lace, you got a dirty face. It's such a big disgrace. We got the international swine in town. Oh, baby, that's what the globalists like. Now, let me ask you something. Let's go down the pecking list here in terms of priority. We got Chantilly disgrace going on. We have the, Camp Mogan-David outside of Washington with the Peckerwood in the White House, and a handful of other sleazes that are all, they're all trying to impress everybody that who can be the slobbiest at a meeting. I don't know if you saw the pictures. And then you've got Chicago. Now, on top of that, you have the Russians, which, by the way, they know there's a lot of animosity in Colorado and all over the country about foreign troops being in the U.S. So this is, water testing, but also pulling people's minds in yet a fourth direction. But let's say that you're looking at, for instance, this from just a security issue. You're throwing a whole bunch of activities, all 4 points of the compass, by the way, guys, at the security apparati, if you look at this as being the Soviet-type system, all at once. Now, why would you do that? I mean, we're talking a big pile of, feces coming in here. You got, Chantilly disgrace. You got the Bilderbergers in your face. You got of course, the G8 with who can be the biggest slob, the slob in the White House or the other slob standing around with them. And then you've got of course, Chicago affair, the occupation of the center of the United States. And you've got foreign troops under arms practicing to kill Americans. Let me ask you, which would be your first and foremost priority for security of those four? Now, if you're American, you all know that the first priority would, in theory, be where is the POTUS? Okay, where's that pile of gunk that if that you find in the back 40, you step in it, it gets on your leather shoes, and they stink so bad that if you can't wash it off, you got to burn them to get rid of them. POTUS. You step it in the back 40, pretty disgusting. Usually shows up in piles, like there's a pile of POTUS over there, and there's another pile of POTUS over there. Oh, wait, I mean, the president, okay? So you got POTUS everywhere, stepping in it left and right. Well, obviously that would be a priority, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be a high priority for the Secret Service? I'm sorry, the Secret Security Forces? It should be. But let's take a look again. Then we've got Chantilly disgrace with the ring knockers, the international overlord ring knockers, wagging their weenies in everybody's face by coming into America at this point in time while they've been busy picking it apart and doing everything they could to destroy it industrially, destroy it educationally, and to get ready to carve it up into pieces. Then on top of that, you have NATO/United Nations military forces, because NATO back in 1999 signed on to the big contract. And everybody who was told, everybody who years ago said this is what they're going to do, they were all crazy. ABC, NBC, CBS, and Communist News Network all were, told to repeat over and over again the lie that would never happen, that NATO would never be a UN asset, and U.S. forces would not be under the UN, under UN command. But then we have Panetta here, that parasite, that big schnoz, little squeeze head. In fact, he looks like, well, of course, air is free, the nose is big. But you got the big schnoz, sloping forehead, tiny chin, little pea eyes, looks like a swine, or the bear, as Kipling said, the eyes of the swine. Anyway, Panetta sits there in front of the Congress and says the Constitution doesn't count, and they're going to go by UN authority. Cha-ching! What did we tell you? What did all those patriots say for years and years and years? Now, I will say, what would be your part if why would you have all of these hypercritical events all within the same window, except as a practice, a way to conceal the Sovietization of America right in your face? In other words, do it and yet claim that you're doing something else. Because each event is claimed to be separate, is claimed to be isolated, but they're not. You have Chantilly disgrace with the shysters wagging their weenies, the big piles of feces, all lumped up in one place, and people are screaming at them and whatever, and they're just like laughing their arse off. Look who showed up, Bernanke's there. Wow, what a surprise. So the parasite, the American parasite's going to kowtow and lick rumpus of the big dinks that are actually pulling his strings. You have the G8, which are being slapped around. They're told that they're the core, because you got to remember there's also like the G20. Remember what happened to the G20? Why have these 8 show up when there's the G10, the G20, etc., etc.? So we have just the G8. Well, basically this looks like a subaltern, like the mini management of the other group from Chantilly disgrace. The peons, the ones that are all being, the meat puppet, teleprompter reading peons that are being run by the Bilderberg. Well, then we have the center operation with NATO, which in reality is a practice, all of these are, at manipulating non-centrally controlled but manipulative forces on the ground. Example, the average peon out there with a billy club who's wanting, who's raving about the idea that they're going to get to go beat on somebody, and the mentality they have, they really don't care who it is. If their mother was out in front of them, those cops would be beating mom down just as quick as they would anybody else, whatever punk kid screaming and hollering, or whoever it is that might be out there holding a sign or chanting a mantra or whatever. They wouldn't care. The roids, the drugs, and the alcohol will be speaking for them. But if you look at the overview on this, this is a 4-point plus tactical, local tactical deployment, but strategic deployment in general to flex and see if they can maneuver enough of the idiots in uniform that they'll follow orders no matter what. Now, my only question is, with the 4 actions, like I said, what would your pecking order be? How would you prioritize this operation, and how would you justify, in fact, with the quote-unquote terror risk? Okay, because think about it. The LCIA is going to attack, blah, 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 whatever you want to pull out of your arse, and whatever. See, at the security briefings, think of all the BS they're pulling out of their hind end. And it's like, really? Well, if that's the case, why are we having all these things at once? If there's such a great risk, and if, will the horror never end, will the terror never cease, why do we have all this stuff going on at once? Why did anybody allow that to happen all within the same window? Doesn't make any sense. Unless there's some other agenda that, we're not supposed to talk about, which, of course, we know there is. But for the peons and for the numbskulls that are in the security apparati, they can just keep rah-rah pumping them up, because they'll point in one direction, then they'll point in the other, then they'll point in the third, then they can point in the fourth. But that's not all that's going on here. Right now, remember, we have a series of training exercises, FTXs, field training exercises, and simulations, quote-unquote, like they had at 9/11, taking place all along the U.S. border, from Maine through to New York, through to Pennsylvania, across, let's see, the Dakotas, let's see, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Idaho, Montana, and then Alaska. So with these operations and with the known formations involved to include air assets, etc., the Dakotas and the Minnesota operation involving both ground forces and aviation assets, if you look at this as a battle board, like I said, start mapping this out, the idea is to test to see if you've got everybody stupefied enough that they would follow an order, no matter how ludicrous or insane it would sound, because you can move people. You know, the idea is to try and move everybody in mass so that they don't realize it until it's too late. The question always has been, well, how did the Red Terror come about? How did it take place? A whole bunch of idiots who thought they could ride to their retirement, or a whole bunch of idiots who thought they could just follow certain orders or follow the orders and get away with it until retirement, until they could get away from things, man. Well, everybody did their part, and the whole of the machine started to tumble like a rock slide, handful of pebbles, and these pebbles were all directed. They were all the Bolsheviks, they were all the communists in the regime in different points who started to move things. And of course, the secret police are the key to this. They're the pebble pushers. They're the ones with the pinpricks and the bayonets that stick into the arse of whoever it is they want to start moving, so that even those are like, well, I would never do this, except, well, everybody else is pushed towards it. Anybody who questions it, the idea that what they think they're going to do is start executing or arresting, and nobody's going to catch on that this is going to happen because there'd be total lack of communications. Now, that's the agenda, or if you look at it from their training perspective strategically, that's what all of these events simultaneously are testing. They're testing to see. In fact, if you consider, let's throw some other things in. Our friends down in Arizona know that the border has been pretty well left wide open. Call from New Mexico asking, well, what do I think? What does this overview present? Well, we've got the Chinese in Mexico. We don't know how many are there, but the demonstration of the Chinese activities there, you can go to Google search and then punch in Chinese military force or military assets or Chinese training in Mexico. Now, let's not forget Costco and all these other China corps were actually established first in Mexico. So we financed the bridgehead that put all of the transport companies in place, which is the toughest part of any kind of military operation, guys. You know, typically if you were to do it and say, like, well, let's go back a few years. Grenada. The Russians decide that down in Grenada, they're going to, quote-unquote, build an airport for Grenada. Now, Grenada's a dot on your arse. Grenada is a dot on a flea's arse. That's how small the thing really is. But the Russians decided to move military assets in. The Russians are doing the groundwork. They build up the airport, and it's set up for military support operations. And they bring Cubans in to work with the Russians and with the Grenadan military, which is very little, you know, there's little to speak of, if anything, and it's mostly local defense forces. Well, guess what? We decided we had to go save those poor students. See how that works? Okay, you put a military site in, ready to, actually they were going to station a backfire bomber fleet. They remember a small unit, but they were going to put it in place. And it would be one of those, let's see how close we can get to a Cuban Missile Crisis kind of scenario. Well, that was the excuse to go in and save the students. Read that, the CIA spooks who were operating at the quote-unquote school who were spying on the Grenadans. That's all that is to it. Now, not a problem there, because they have spies, we have spies. They have fake students, we have fake students. They have more fake students than we have. And if everybody's spying on everybody, including the Israelis spying on us, claiming to be our students, when in reality they're not. They're working for themselves and backstabbing everybody in all directions. Same was true down in Grenada, by the way. But we invaded, guys. Do you remember that? We dropped troops in there. We went in from all directions. The Rangers, dropped in. Airborne units dropped in. Marines landed on the beach. And the rest is history. Okay, well, the communist Chinese government set up porting facilities that allow for massive wholesale transport by container of anything you want to put in those containers. And all of a sudden, that's perfectly okay. And where did they put them? On the Pacific ground site for Mexico. Now, this count also the ones they have in the U.S., because remember that under the contracted agreements, the only people going to be inspecting these containers, and this is the case, are the communist Chinese. So whatever is in the container, of course they've checked it. If it's nuclear, or if it's been scanned for nuclear, the radiation scan sites that are for Costco are in the Caribbean and in Mexico. And Americans don't run them, only the communist Chinese do. Oh, that's right. So, see, there's all kinds of fun things here. This, of course, creates a beachhead. Now you've got command and control operation testing going on. You got a series of pings going on in Mexico right now, brag-ups overseas by the Chinese, that they already have military force on the ground in the, both the Central American area and across the United States. Well, what could they be talking about? What could they be bragging up about? What do you mean? There's Chinese marching in the streets of America? Well, next time you see a Costco container go by, why do you think that's full of lawnmowers? What else could that be full of? Yeah, you all know what that means. Anyway, here's the music. We're going to go to break. You grab that cup of coffee. It's Communications Tuesday. Oh, yeah, there we go. Well, about 6 minutes, we'll be back here with the next half hour. The first half hour of the Intel Report. It's Tuesday.